Lesson 10 Out of unity you arise. The return to unity is your destiny. The mind discovers the path of return while the heart provides the key to each stage along the way. Dear friend, universal justice, karma and universal law. Universal justice is often known by the name of karma. In this name, many accuse universal justice of being the source of all their unhappiness, and the fear resulting from this negative interpretation leads them to adopt a more or less fatalistic attitude which doesn't help at all. In reality, universal justice is total. It applies to the totality of the universe, and its symbol, the balance or scales, signifies that the equilibrium of the universe cannot be disturbed for long before the fixed laws re-establish the balance. The universal law is not the lex talionis. It doesn't compensate according to the formula, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Universal law obliges all beings to do that for which they have been created. It forces them to accomplish their growth. It is so for everything in nature. Man's growth, as we said before, in order to realize his growth, man must first evolve. He must descend from his primordial divine state to the animal state of the earth. The universal law compels him to descend. Everything which materializes represents good for him. When, in that state, he has acquired the necessary elements for his growth, then, through the means of the nadir, the law is reversed and compels him to reascend, to return to his first divine state, but this time with knowledge. Now his growth is that which spiritualizes him, liberates him from the hold of matter, nonetheless without denying, rejecting or destroying matter. The descent and the reascent take place in involutionary and devolutionary cycles. All cycles contain the number 6, the number of balance, but also the number of the beast in the Apocalypse 666. We said previously, Lesson 6, that the cycle of each stage contains 12 phases. Here, however, we consider each of the two halves of the cycle, that is, 6 positive, active phases and 6 negative passive phases. The passage of the nadir reverses the action of this cycle. That which was active toward matter becomes passive, and that which was passive toward the spiritual becomes active. The passage of the nadir is not the end of the journey but the beginning of the great return journey. Imbalance and balance. If at the end of each cycle, man hasn't rebalanced his energies, he is imbalanced in the following cycle, and universal balance compels him to amend this situation. Of course, after the initiation of the nadir, what, in this world, doesn't work toward his evolution certainly imbalances his energies. An uncomfortable physical situation may result, which is also physically painful because it prevents nature from undertaking its repair work. As soon as we direct our path, our work in the direction requested by our growth, the energetic equilibrium is re-established. At the same time, the so-called karma disappears. Man becomes free. The energies of the universal balance are transmitted to our physical plane, level 10, through the channel of level 9. The moon. Thus the state of balance is more rapidly recovered if you work directly on level 9. Sin. The problem of karma is usually misunderstood because our inner walls, again, prevent the light from coming in. These walls result from men being impregnated with erroneous notions, in particular the physical, intellectual, concepts of good and evil. Religious morality and the concept of sin constitute one part. Another part is constituted by the narrow concepts of our laws, our customs, and our justice, the criteria of which are often foreign to universal justice. The being is beyond all the feelings man of earth may experience. There can be no offense towards him. Divine laws are expressed in the laws of nature which fundamentally cannot be broken. Man cannot go beyond the limits of those laws. Man cannot hope to become the master of nature without obeying its laws. F. Bacon. The laws of nature describe a framework which is the limit of man's possibilities. The true sin would be to go out of this framework, a task quite impossible for man. Sin, in the current sense of the word, doesn't exist. However, within the framework, man can act in agreement or in disagreement with the necessities of his growth. His wanderings result from the choices he made against his growth. Again, Nature and the being do not judge events from the same standpoint as man of earth. The Eternal says, "My wisdom is not your wisdom, but your wisdom is madness in the eyes of the Eternal." Factors of balance. Several points should be carefully considered and mastered, if we wish to remain balanced. First of all, we should liberate our inner judgment from any artificial conditioning. Moreover, if we want to understand the action of universal justice, we should keep in mind that the good for whoever involves is that which takes him away from the origin, that which makes him descend into matter. Conversely, the good for whoever evolves is that which takes him away from matter and pushes him towards his return, his origin, where he'll become a knower. In order to neutralize and master karma, we could say our difficulties, our stumbling blocks, we should remember that universal justice is infallible. It doesn't play a punishing role, but it essentially ensures everyone's growth. Moreover, every attempt made in the positive direction generates great and immediate improvements. This is not incompatible with universal justice. As a matter of fact, if we are of goodwill, we can begin to glimpse the nature of the solution, but the balance may not be necessarily re-established at once. However, this attitude somehow provides time credit. We'll have the necessary time to consolidate ourselves, to become stronger. The task which, at the beginning, seemed unsurmountable will only require relatively easy work. How can we participate in or be a part of the solution? First of all, the most obvious thing is not to complicate our case, and the first practice is silence. As a matter of fact, talking about our problems with the conscious or unconscious intention to complain about or justify our behavior certainly results in the prolongation of the situation, even if the latter doesn't get worse. It is the same when we decide to help somebody wrongly. Of course, we can talk about our problems to people competent in their own domain, like a confidant, a doctor, a lawyer, etc., but no one else. The less individuals know of your problem, the easier it is to resolve it, the easier it is to dissolve it. We should therefore avoid giving it a fixed quality by crystallizing it. Before we ask others for any help, we should strive to help ourselves. God helps those who help themselves. Sweeping the front of our door sometimes allows us, if we have the least intuition, to abandon our ideas, our projects, in order to examine if anything better or at least less bad could present itself. To be in love with our ideas may lead us to keep them and therefore to block our own development. Finally, we should strive to establish inner contact. For this purpose, the best meditation time is the hour following sunrise on Monday morning. If, after we have made every effort possible to make our first steps alone, nothing has improved, we may ask for the help of someone we judge more advanced. In this case, we should ask for help without giving any explanations. We should not hinder the transmission of the will of the higher self. Remember that the little king consults the great king. The difficulties we meet and we wish to resolve often originate from events produced by our society, our civilization, which we may dislike or even loathe. We should certainly not remain passive or be timid, but we should be careful and watchful in our actions. We should remember that universal justice applies in a comprehensive way to groups, nations, humanity, and the galaxies. On this subject, if we wish to glimpse what kind of forces lead the religions and nations, it is very edifying to examine their outer symbols and to compare them. At that level, a religion or a state which denies its symbol in spirit or in deeds is doomed to disappear. Another cause of trouble in this world, and not the least, is the fact that to this day some evolve and some still involve. If we bring together an evolving being and an involving being into a couple, sooner or later, the couple will split because the created situation becomes unbearable. It is the same with big groups and nations. If the involutionary is stronger, we obtain a certain type of society. If the evolutionary is stronger, we obtain another. During the phases in which humanity collectively approaches the nadir, we go through unstable situations. Within any country or group in which the evolutionary predominates over the involutionary, social mutations necessarily occur. On the subject of incarnation, the phenomenon of the oscillation of the universal balance is common to all creation. Therefore it also applies to the series of man's incarnations. The latter are repeated until attaining the level of the veil of the abyss, that is to say the level at which the being completes his terrestrial journey. There he recovers the original wisdom. We may be surprised to hear people claim with certainty, "This is my last incarnation." They commit a gross error which certainly indicates a lack of balance. When the inner state no longer needs to return to earth, it is the current practice to return and be of service. The ones who are at that level never say that they won't return. The union of the two selves within them ensures them of, if not a comfortable life, at least a decent life without any major problems in this world. Often, individuals who have serious difficulties say, "It's the last one." Their difficulties demonstrate the very fact that they did not master the domain of matter. Non-return is only possible through the mastery of the 7 lower levels and consequently through the possession of their attributes. Examine the symbols of levels 6 and 4 in particular. Level 6 gives healing power at a distance. Level 4 gives mastery over the elements. If you do not possess these to any degree, you are not ready for the non-return. On the same order of idea, many people who have just been awakened by the passage of the nadir wallow in psychic experiments, perhaps interesting ones but certainly not very useful and perhaps even hindering their progress. It is not advised to consult the archives of nature directly or through clairvoyance in order to nose into past incarnations. If their content is useful to your advance, the higher self will unavoidably grant it to you in the course of your work, but without your asking. Those who do not follow the appropriate path are stopped in their progress, as is shown by the confusion of the Tower of Babel. Oratory work. Proposed exercise: contact with nature's archives. Usual setup. Place yourself in front of the mirror with 2 lit candles. After a few minutes of concentration, whether you obtain the black state or not, snuff the left candle out and place the right one in the center. Concentrate for a short time on the following subject. The right candle, a symbol of the currents of intelligence and mercifulness, is moved toward the center on the channel which links level 10 to level 9. Visualize, this is optional, the symbol of Saturn above the lit candle and above it the waxing moon. Do not ask for anything, be completely passive. If everything goes well, and it will if you repeat the exercise, that which you need to know will be revealed to you through the mirror. Carefully note the symbols because each exercise only gives you a piece of the puzzle which you should progressively reconstruct. Relight the left candle. Replace the center one to the right. Perform a short heart meditation. Perform the closing gesture, or say the closing word. Remember the saying, ora et labora. Ora, we seek a constructive inner contact. Labora, we use the physical world which is essential to our progress. And now, ora et labora. The philosophers of nature appendices, Appendix #1 positive and negative, active and passive appendix to the archives of nature Appendix 1 positive and negative, active and passive. Every day we call negative things which seem bad and positive things which seem good. The word passive often takes on the meaning of lazy and active the meaning of energetic. These ethical values start falling off when we study nature's laws, such as electricity for example. We learn that the terms negative and positive represent 2 separate qualities of the electrical current, 2 opposite but complementary qualities. Light is another example. The light energy is invisible in intersidereal spaces in which we know there is darkness. When this light meets with our atmosphere, which represents the obstacle, the passive element, light manifests. In the same way, which the astronauts have confirmed, the sky is dark when seen from the moon because there is no atmosphere, there is no obstacle. But the Earth, again the obstacle, is lit because it reflects light. At a higher level, in unity, the negative and the positive are united, as we have studied in this class. They only separate in duality. If one or the other didn't exist, there could be no duality. That which differentiates them is a force essential to manifestation. The active energy cannot manifest if it doesn't encounter a passive obstacle. As soon as we realize the necessity of the passive in order for nature to be animated, active, we no longer attribute the meaning bad to the word negative, and we gradually come to understand the necessity for the existence of an obstacle. The notions of passive and active actually take such a place in our unconscious that we should constantly seek to redefine their meaning apart from any ethical or qualitative evaluation. We think we were precise enough, in this class, first about the difference between involution and devolution, descent and ascent, passive and active, and on the other hand the fact that they are a necessity for the growth of the being who must definitely follow this path. Once again, let us say that in the involutionary course beings provoke such a materiality that the place of spirituality is minimal. This situation is reversed during the ascent. A difficulty remains, however, because in many circumstances, the values attributed to the terms negative and positive are overlapping as much in their ethical aspect as in their aspect of laws of nature, without necessarily a confusion in meaning. As a matter of fact, as we just mentioned, that which suits to the involutionaries, beings in involution, is the reverse of that which suits the evolutionaries, ascending beings. Thus, regardless of the stage we find ourselves in, we are necessarily in opposition with beings who are sensibly at the same level but on the other side of the journey. Even if we admit to the necessity of this difference in polarity, it is important that we recognize it as a hindrance which we quickly qualify as negative because we do not feel comfortable in it. To get out of it or to see it clearly, we should always bear in mind this notion of necessity and find out where we are in order to appreciate where it is appropriate to place your stone in the equilibrium of the universal balance. Appendix 2. The archives of nature. Any action, any fact, any thought is automatically recorded in the memories of nature or archives of nature or akasha for the Easterners. Each thing of the earth is thus recorded in the 9 higher levels. But each level only takes the recording which corresponds to it, that is, that within the event which corresponds to its level. In other words, each event impregnates the various levels depending upon how it resonates with them. Thus, we should be very careful in the interpretation of a vision. Generally, and especially when the archives of nature become naturally accessible to you, you only perceive one level at a time. In this case, the image of the thing thus obtained is incomplete. In addition, at each level the space-time is different from ours, and there can be time durations